الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد. One of the biggest things that we struggle with on a daily basis, whether that's decisions that we make on a daily basis or if it's regarding life decisions, things that will affect us down the line and things that we understandably have to maintain as not only believers in Islam but as humans, is being able to live with the decisions that we make, whether or not they're good or bad. Some of the things that we struggle with is being able to make a decision and not overthinking about that decision that we make. You know, maybe we're at work and we end up making a decision to maybe go forward with something. Or maybe we're in school and we decide to give a certain amount of time to an exam or a test or homework. And we're not gonna really understand the effect of that decision until we end up becoming towards that result, until we reach that result. And one thing that we have to understand is that Islam is not a results-oriented religion, right? I think a lot of things that we learn growing up, and this is something that we understand just by going to the masjid or being engaged in a community or just being around like our family, is understanding that it's the effort that we put in, not the result that's attained at the end. Because a lot of times we'll go through something and we might not do something thinking that it's going to end well, but Allahu A'lam, based on that decision or based on that outcome, it turns out to be something that maybe positively affected you or positively affected someone else. But let's say that doesn't happen, right? Let's say that we make a decision, good or bad, with good intentions or bad intentions, and that ends up not leading to something that we expected or something that we hadn't hoped for, or something that might have negatively affected someone else. Whether that's family, whether that's yourself, whether that's someone around you. And being able to live with that negativity without asking those questions like what if, or what if I did this, why did I end up going through this, that hardship that stays in our head naturally for a long time. And I say this as an example to myself because I tend to overthink a lot about decisions that, what if I did this, or maybe if I did this, that wouldn't have happened. Right? And we take away an example from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the Battle of Khattak, the Battle of the Trench, where I'm sure a lot of you have heard the story of, but from a specific perspective that I recently learned of that I thought would be good to share today, is during the Battle of Khattak, obviously the plan was to dig a trench around the city, a plan that was made by Salman the Persian, Salman al-Farsi, Sahaba that had recently been kind of initiated into this community at Medina, who had traveled all the way from Persia to kind of be around this community, to be around from what he had been told to be a blessed community of brothers who actually believed in a community. And so this idea that was brought up, was initiated very, very short of a time frame before the Quraysh were expected to reach Medina. And this is an army that was, at the time, the biggest army that had ever been formulated in the history, of known history at that time. Give or take around 10,000. To the believers in Medina, that was nothing compared to them in terms of resources, in terms of manpower, in terms of anything that they had to offer. And so this was considered to be their best plan, to be able to dig a trench around Medina so that the Quraysh would not be able to enter the city. And so when they were building this trench, they eventually fell under a specific rock in one part of Medina, a rock so big that none of them, no matter how much effort they put in, no matter how hard they tried, were not able to even dent the rock or even break off a single small piece. And so naturally, as a result, word's going to spread around, there's this huge rock that's here that no one is able to break. Nothing we do is changing it. And there's a risk of it being used as a bridge for the Quraysh to be able to pass. So if we don't get rid of this, what's the point of even doing everything around us? And so word finally got to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and by that time the Sahaba were panicked. They were stressed out. There was fear amongst them because they don't know what to do. And so when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came in and really contemplated this assessment, and this is what we truly appreciate about the mindset of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that some ulama even argue that the analysis and the way that Rasulullah would kind of formulate his thoughts was considered to be wahy, was considered to be a revelation. Because when you say the word that Rasulullah was a genius, we interpret that as a level of human intellect, right? And we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all the prophets to have the highest level of intelligence. We consider Rasulullah to be even farther than that, to take a step further from that. And so when he contemplates this assessment, and when he gets there and sees this scenario that's going on of the Sahaba who are just stressed out and there's fear amongst them, fear in their hearts, not knowing what to do, what does he do? He doesn't address the fact that there's a rock here. He doesn't address the problem that everyone sees. What does he do? He transforms the attitude of the people around them. What do I mean by that? I mean that it's not about the problem that's in front of them, it's about the way they reacted to it that caused them to think that there's nothing else they can do. When you have that sense of fear in your heart, when you have that sense of negativity, what's going to happen? You're not going to be able to think properly. You're not going to be able to think straight. Right? When we think of emotional stability, this is something that both brothers and sisters are affected by naturally. When there's a reason where we say, why don't we let things tone down a bit? Why don't we calm down? And let's address this problem maybe a little bit later. I'm sure everyone's been in that situation before. Why is it that we do that? We do that because we need to tone down our mind, but our hearts at the same time to be able to make rational decisions on these things. And so when we come back to this story, Rasulullah grabs his pickaxe or axe or whatever resource he had, and he strikes the rock as hard as he can. And naturally, when stones collide, sparks fly. And so this huge sparks, bigger than any other spark that they've witnessed or ever seen, goes off in one way. And what does Rasulullah say? He says, this is Persia. And then he strikes it again. Another spark, same size, goes across the opposite way. And what does he say? He says, this is Yemen. And then again, one more time. And this goes on a spark towards the north. And what does he say? He says, this is Sham. So what does he mean by this? He means that this is a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in this trial, in this tribulation, we are working towards becoming world conquerors down the line. That's crazy to think about when there's not much going for you, right? To be able to think to that extent, to have that sense of positivity when going through a lot of struggles, it's very, very hard, right? But when you have the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling you this and engaging you in this confidence, what happens as a result? The Sahaba's newly found confidence starts to arise and starts to increase and progress towards, this newfound strength and this newfound energy. And eventually they were able to finally get rid of the rock, right? And so what does this tell us? This tells us that it's not about the problem that may or not be right in front of you. It's about the mindset and what place in your heart that characterizes the way you react to that decision. What do I mean by this? I mean by when we make a decision, we have to understand that, we're not going to know what's going to be the right or wrong answer at that time. We can think it, and I think everyone here has been in that scenario where they've been so confident about answering a problem or answering a solution, and it ends up being the complete opposite thing. I know because I literally did this at work yesterday. I was so confident about this one thing that I didn't think I needed to reach out to anyone. I was very confident in it. I had everything I needed. I submitted it. It ended up being the completely wrong scenario, or something was wrong. And one thing that kind of entered my mind was, why didn't I just ask? Or why couldn't I have just taken a little bit of effort to take some time to message maybe my mentor or my manager or someone that would have been able to help? And a lot of times what this does is it instills this sense of fear in your heart down the line the more you continue to do it. Naturally, as a result, what's going to happen? The more you tend to do something, especially negatively, what enters your heart? Fear, right? Fear is a tool in the Quran that is said to be the main tool of Iblis. What is it that the trick of Shaitan is? It is meant to put something in your heart, put something and instill something in you to make you question something that takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who tried to do this? The munafiq. The munafiq during the time of Rasulullah were known to be the worst of the munafiq compared to this day and age. And so what did they try to do? They tried to question this the same way that I'm sure some of you are questioning this. They go up to the Sahaba and they say, if we can barely make ends meet with the resources that we have against this army, if we can't even, and this is the example they use, we can't even go to the bathroom without being afraid of an ambush or being afraid of someone attacking us, what makes us think that we're going to be world conquerors, as Rasulullah said? And so what's the answer to this? When we really think about this, we can say that, this is wahi from Rasulullah, right? This is revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Messenger of Allah, and because of that, this is more than enough for us to be able to maintain. It's very hard for us to be able to admit that, even within ourselves today, right? Understanding that there's a higher purpose, understanding that there's a higher power involved, and just thinking about this from a logical perspective, especially when you're having conversations with maybe your non-Muslim friends, maybe you're at work, maybe you're just having a conversation about things like that. They're not going to understand that. They're going to struggle to maintain that balance along those lines of, I only trust logic and science. I don't believe in a higher power. What's our answer to that? Realistically, how many of us can really question ourselves and say, do we actually have the answer to that? Can we confidently talk about this and have a conversation about this? Forget about having a conversation with someone else. Can we have that conversation within ourselves? Right? And so the response to the Sahaba was what? The Sahaba was because this is a sign of being a true Muslim. This is a sign of having true faith in Islam and in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? What is the biggest thing that we struggle with as a society nowadays? We struggle with the fact of maintaining our identity as a Muslim. Whether that's in our schools with the initiatives that are being taken, whether that's in our workplace with a lot of maybe events or happy hours that you don't want to go to and no one understands why. Maybe you're not willing to have that conversation with them because we can't even have that conversation within ourselves. We can't justify the means of us to act in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe because we think we know, but what's the reality? None of us really can answer that question confidently. If I was to go up to another Muslim on the street, say I was a non-Muslim, and I go up to them and I'm genuinely interested, and I want to ask, what does it mean to be a Muslim? What does it mean to have faith? What does it mean to be strong in your religion? How many of us can truly answer that? And so we can't help but ask this question, how often are we willing to admit if we're okay with the decisions that we make? If not only these decisions affect ourselves, but affect those around us and affect our families. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. The point that I'm trying to make is that a lot of times we are going to make decisions, and a lot of times, maybe not so often, but the majority of those times, we're going to tend to overthink a lot of the decisions that we made and the results of those decisions. When we make a decision, let's categorize this. It ends up being a decision that we do with good intentions or we do with bad intentions, right? Allahu A'lam, because we can't speak on that from anyone else. But what can we really judge it based on is what was said at the time and what was known at the time to make that decision. Because what did we say before? Islam is not a result-oriented religion. Islam is an effort-based oriented religion, right? It does not matter about what the result is. It does not matter about what you did bad. One thing that I talked about in my class is there's 3 specific ways that you can go about doing something with intentions. The first one is if you do a bad intention and it ends up being good, what happens? Yes, the good thing happens, but you don't get the reward for it. But if you do something good and something bad happens as a result, obviously depending on the situation, but generally speaking, you have a good intention and you do something bad, what happens? You still get the reward for it. Just because the result wasn't bad doesn't mean that the effort was bad. And so, one thing that I think we all struggle with is just being able to take away from a lot of these concepts and a lot of these things that are spoken about. Brothers specifically, we have khutbahs every single week, right? We listen or we have a talk or we have a concept that is being pushed on us, not pushed on us specifically, but at least being taught to us, at least being communicated with us. That's a reminder for not only myself, but for everyone else, is that how often are we really taking away from these things? How often can we really say, there was a khutbah 3 weeks ago, there was a khutbah a month ago that I remember this specific point about, or I remember what the khutbah even was about. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember what the khutbah was about 4 weeks ago. That's a problem. Not only for myself, but for everyone here. this isn't just a problem for the brothers, this is a problem for brothers and sisters as well. Regardless of what lectures, what talks we go to, what are we really achieving by it as we go to it? And so, one thing that I wanted to mention before kind of ending this off is, if there's one thing I always say, it's always try to at least take one thing away from regardless of whatever congregation you're in. Right? If there's one thing that I would want you guys to take away from this, is to always try to take away one thing. And so I'll mention 3 things, but I would appreciate it if you at least try to take one thing away. And so the first thing I wanted to mention, and kind of like understanding this hardship of living with hardship, living with this questioning about overthinking and these what ifs, and just not being able to not live with yourself but agree with yourself about the decisions that we make. The first thing that I would want you guys to know, and as a reminder for myself first and foremost, is understand to learn to be open about yourself with yourself. Right? Understand when you may or may not be struggling with something, what the reality is behind it, and be willing to admit that you made a mistake. Very oftentimes, a lot of us are not willing to admit to ourselves, forget about anyone else, ourselves, that what we did was wrong. What happens as a result? You're going to naturally think that nothing's wrong with that and progress it even more and more and more. And this is where the trick of shaitan comes along, where he instills that one little tiny drop of questionable or sense or stress or fear in your heart, and thinking it's okay, and then you continue to do it to the extent that you're doing it out of your own free will. Shaitan is not involved anymore. That's what shaitan's role is, just that first step. Everything past that is you just thinking it's okay. And so learn to be open with yourself about yourself. The second thing I wanted to mention is learn to take away from the people around you. Be open to, not only, now that we've admitted there's a problem within ourselves, and a lot of people say, the first step to a solution is admitting that there is one. So let's say we've reached that first step, and we've reached that point where we've understood that there's a problem. Learn to be able to open up to people around you. I understand that, maybe some friends around us, maybe there are some people that we don't trust to be able to talk about these things. I urge you to find someone, if not someone in your life already, where you have that sense of trust and you have that sense of respect with them, to be able to open up to them and say, I'm not feeling good about this, but I don't want to keep it to myself because I know it's just going to make it even worse. And so the third thing, and I'll end off with this, is understand that every decision made, correct or wrong, bad intentions, good intentions, happens through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Surah Baqarah? He says, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And perhaps something you don't like is good for you. And then he continues, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. And perhaps something you love is not good for you. And then he ends, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah knows and we do not. And so this is what tawakkul is. This is having trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understanding that there is a higher power involved in this. Meaning that I don't see the solution, I don't see how this is going to progress down the line. I don't really know what's going to happen. But what do I do know? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna ma'ya rabbi sayahdeen. He says, my Lord is with me and He will guide me through. And so more importantly, on this day of Ashura, on this blessed day of the 10th of Muharram, where it's supposed to be a day of self-reflection. Not just a day of self-reflection, a day of asking for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a day of dua, etc. But more importantly, a self-reflection of being able to actually put things into perspective and question whether or not what we're doing is where we want to be. And so I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to really help us put that into perspective, to be able to live with the hardships that we face, to be able to take away this fear from our hearts and be able to understand that the level of taqwa and tawakkul that we have in our hearts can never be too much. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا واشرف عنا شر ما قضيت ربنا عليك توكلنا واليك انبنا واليك المصير ربنا لا تؤاخذنا ان نسينا او اخطانا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا اسرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقه لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا انت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين عباد الله ان الله يامر بالعدل والاحسان وايتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه على نعمته يزدكم وذكر الله اكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون واقم الصلاه.
Allahu Akbar, Shadu la ilaha illallah, Shadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala falah, Qad qamati الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
واعتبروا صوتكم فإن تسوية الصفوف من تمام السلام. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق من ماء دافق يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب إنه على رجعه لقادر يوم تبلى السرائر فما له من قوة ولا ناصر والسماء ذات الرجع والأرض ذات الصدع إنه لقول فصل وما هو بالهزل إنهم يكيدون كيدا وأكيد كيدا فمهل الكافرين أمهلهم رويدا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I'd like to thank our Khatib Umar for wonderful khutbah. Alhamdulillah. I just want to let the brothers and sisters mark the calendar for the 19th of August. Is the only sisters banquet happening at Dar Arkham School, inshallah. So we want all these brothers to let their sisters know about this event. So we'll have a successful one, inshallah, and all the sisters can come out and bond together, inshallah. August 19th at Darul Arqam School. We'll have more of the flyers posted all over on the WhatsApp and the website, inshallah. Also, on the first Saturday, we have the story time coming at the Masala, inshallah, at 7 p.m., inshallah. So please remember that, inshallah. Also, we do have a second Jummah every Friday here at 1:45. So if this one is a little too packed for you, or you can make it 1:45, please do so. Assalamu alaikum.